Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Mother's Day. Thank you to so many of you in our church who have been such faithful and loving and godly mothers over the years, and a special happy Mother's Day to my mother and mother-in-law and grandmothers who will be tuning into this message for sure. We always like to have something special for our Mother's Day service. A flower to give to the ladies, or a kid's song, or something that just makes the day unique. And so today we have put together a short Mother's Day video with some of the people in our church to greet you and wish you a happy Mother's Day.
Our mom is such an amazing mother. She would always love on us and care on us even when we did not deserve it. She made countless sacrifices to make sure we were always happy and healthy. As you can see here, she is giving medicine to Pippa. She's not only a great mother to us 4 kids, but also to all of the kids with 4 legs. We love you, Mom. We hope you have an amazing Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. We love you.
Hey Mom, happy Mother's Day. I'm glad I was able to drive up and surprise you this weekend. I know it meant a lot. Sorry that quarantine has been keeping us apart, but at least I can still talk every day, and we have this weekend to spend together. Can't wait for once we can travel again, because you're my favorite travel buddy and you're an awesome role model to look up to, and I love that you're my mom. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, First Baptist. Dan Scales here. When I think of my mom, I think of 1 Corinthians 13 in a way that you replace the word love with mom. My mom is patient. My mom is kind. My mom is not envious. My mom is not boastful, and she is not proud. My mom has never dishonored others. My mom is not self-seeking. My mom has never been easily angered. My mom records no wrongs. My mom does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. My mom has always protected us, always trusted us, always hopes for the best in us. My mom's love has never failed. I was very fortunate to have the mom I did. She was truly a gift from God. Happy Mother's Day.
To the best mom in the world, happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day from The Paws, with a special Mother's Day greeting to my wife and the mother of these 2 young ladies, Jennifer Paw, my mother, Linda Paw, and Jen's mom, Sue Schwartz. And now, a Mother's Day poem.
You were always sure you kept us fed. When the night falls, you tuck us in our beds. You snuggle with us when we're cold and build us up when we're not bold. This Mother's Day, please know you're loved. We pray for blessings to you from God above. Happy Mother's Day!
That's good. Day, Mom. Grandma Mocha. Nana Everhart and Yaya Everhart.
Happy Mother's Day!
To all the mothers at First Baptist Church from New Land of Him, we have a couple verses for you today. From Proverbs 31, verses 25, 26, and 29. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue.
Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all.
And to our mother, you can count on me like 1, 2, 3, and I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what family's supposed to do, oh yeah. Love you, Mom.
Hi, happy Mother's Day to my lovely wife Sharon of 13 years, and also to my daughter Brittany Glanville, who's also a mother of 2 of my grandchildren. She's an Army wife in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So happy Mother's Day. Thank you.
I love my mom because she loves us and she takes care of us. I love my mom because she helps us and she's patient. I love my mommy because she's so pretty and she's so kind.
Jillian, we love you, and we just want to thank you for all that you do for us. We're so blessed to have you as our mommy and for me to have you as my wife. We love you so much, and we just want to say Happy Mother's Day!
Thank you to all who participated in putting together that video to make this Mother's Day special. Have you ever hit the point where you just cry out and say, this doesn't make any sense? Have you ever said that over the course of the last week, where you just read a news story, look at a headline, and you say, this doesn't make any sense? Have you ever hit that point in life where you just don't know what to do? That point in life where your life circumstances just don't seem to make any sense? When I graduated from college, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I'd just come home from a semester abroad. I had worked hard in school. I had gotten good grades. I had some good experiences to put on my resume. I was applying to jobs, and I was getting nothing in response. Nothing seemed to be working out. Now, all of my friends had figured out what they were going to do. They had jobs, they had internships, they had higher education plans, but I just didn't know what I was going to do next. You know, you go through 4 years of school knowing that you're preparing for what's going to come after graduation, and now that I had come to my graduation, I felt like I had hit a dead end. Can you think back to moments in your life where you just are disoriented, where life doesn't seem to make any sense, when everything drastically changes in a moment, when you didn't know what you were going to do after school, when you didn't know what you were going to do after you lost your job, when your parents separated, when your boyfriend or girlfriend suddenly broke up with you, and it just doesn't seem to make any sense. I think at some point we've all said this through the coronavirus pandemic. Well, it doesn't make sense that, and fill in the blank. Well, why do these people... Well, why are our politicians... And it doesn't make sense. The prophet Habakkuk's world does not make sense as we pick up in the second sermon in this series in the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk is having this exchange, this dialogue with God back and forth. And last week we saw that Habakkuk first speaks and wonder how long God is going to allow the wicked in his own country to prosper. The time he's writing, there was an evil king. That evil king and the people were returning to their sinful and idolatrous ways. And so God responds to Habakkuk in Habakkuk chapter 1 and says that he's doing something behind the scenes while Habakkuk and the people weren't even aware of it. God was raising up the Babylonians, a foreign power, to bring justice to the injustices that Habakkuk and the righteous were suffering under at the time. But this raises a whole new set of questions for Habakkuk, a whole new set of questions that he's going to ask as we pick up this morning in Habakkuk 1, verse 12. Please follow along with me as I read. And if you have a Bible at home and would like to open so that you can follow along as I speak, I think that would probably be very helpful for you as well. Habakkuk chapter 1, beginning in verse 12. Lord, are you not from everlasting? My God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You have made people like the fish in the sea, like the sea creatures that have no ruler. The wicked foe pulls all of them up with hooks. He catches them in his net. He gathers them in his dragnet, and so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and burns incense to his dragnet. For by his net he lives in luxury and enjoys the choicest food. Is he to keep on emptying his net, destroying nations without mercy? I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. As Habakkuk tries to make sense of the world that he's living in, God gives guidance to guide him and help him know how to live through it. When things don't make sense, Habakkuk went back to those few things that he knew he could be certain of. He starts this message out by reminding himself of God's character. One, he knows that God is faithful to his people. In the address, he calls out to the Lord. Because it's in all capital letters, we know that this is God's name of Yahweh, the name that God used to reveal himself to Moses. This is the name that gives us the close covenant relationship between God and his people Israel. This is the name that assures God's people of God's presence with them. And God has been with them from everlasting. Where it says from everlasting in that opening line, it's not just talking about God's eternal nature. It's talking about how God has been with them every step of the way. How God has been with them in past intervention in the face of Israel's enemies. God has always been with them. God has seen them through so many trials. And so Habakkuk has confidence that God is going to be faithful to them through this as well. The conclusion of this part of verse 12 is that we will not die. The NIV that I just read said, you will never die, but I think it's probably better and fits the context of the verse to say that we will not die, because it's Habakkuk's confidence that though this enemy is coming to totally destroy them, God is going to keep a faithful remnant of people to keep the eternal promises that he made to Abraham, Moses, and David generations prior to this. He knows that God is faithful, that he is going to be with them even through this invasion that's going to stir up so much chaos. The second thing that Habakkuk knows about God is he knows that God is just in his discipline. Habakkuk clearly understands the point of the Lord's response, his first response that we looked at last week. He knows that the Lord has appointed the Babylonians to execute judgment and punish the wickedness of Judah. David Dockery, one of the commentators I read this week, said that punish here should probably be translated as correct or reprove. That God has sent the Babylonians to correct the people, to reprove them for the wicked things that they were doing. God was bringing the Babylonians to bring judgment, not total destruction. And so there is still a glimmer of hope in Habakkuk's mind. And then the last thing that Habakkuk affirms about God's character in the opening part of his words here in verse 12 is that God is holy. God is holy. Habakkuk makes a theological statement that God is too pure to look on evil and that he cannot tolerate wrongdoing. God is morally perfect. For God to be anything less than morally perfect would make him less than God. And in his moral perfection, he cannot tolerate wrongdoing, which is why God is supposed to execute judgment, why God is supposed to correct and reprove those who have done wrong. Habakkuk understands that God must judge those in his own country who are guilty of this wickedness. That's what he was asking for in chapter 1. And through his first revelation, God showed Habakkuk that he was going to do something about it. And now Habakkuk is questioning why God isn't going to do something about the treacherous Babylonians like he's going to do something about the wicked in his own nation. And this is the part where things begin to make no sense. So at first, he puts his feet down on what he knows to be true. Now he's getting to the part that doesn't make sense. What he knows about God does not match the reality that he is living through. He asked that question that's rooted in the vocabulary of even our youngest of children. But what about them? But what about them? Don't you see what they're doing? God, why do you tolerate the treacherous? Speaking about the Babylonians. God, why are you going to use wickedness to punish wickedness? How can the holy God stand silent before the brutal Babylonians? Why would God excuse a people of idolatry? And David Dockery, and I quote, said, "Would not the cure be worse than the disease?" And we've heard that a lot through the coronavirus. He wrote this before anything coronavirus, anything President Trump related. Would not the cure be worse than the disease? That the Babylonians coming in to judge the wicked of Judah is worse than the wicked of Judah. Habakkuk seems to have three groups on a continuum from righteous to wicked. The righteous of Judah on one end of the spectrum, and the wicked of Babylon on the other end of the spectrum. Last week, he was comparing the first group to the second group, saying, God, why aren't you doing anything about the second group? Now he's comparing the first and second group to the third group, saying they're way worse than anything else that we've witnessed. Number 2 is bad, but number 3 is worse. So God, what are you going to do about the treacherous Babylonians? Look at what they're doing. Look at the metaphor that he uses to describe how bad things are going to get for them. He compares the people to the fish in the sea. The fish in the sea that have no leader to organize their protection. The fish of the sea that were totally defenseless to the schemes of the enemy. This kind of metaphor, this word picture, communicates how the other small nations were totally defenseless to the militant advances of the Babylonians. He says that they are like, the wicked are like pulling the fish up out of the sea. Indiscriminately, the Babylonians pull up the wicked and the righteous together. They treat their victims like the lowliest of creatures. Walvoord said that the evil Babylonians had as little regard for the welfare of humanity as fishermen have for unprotesting fish. And so, because of the wealth and luxury that comes from their conquest, they worship their nets. They are idolatrous. Their strength and their conquest brought them this luxury. They brought them this power. They brought them all of this new geographical territory. And so, they worship the things that make them happy. They worship the things that bring them a lavish lifestyle. People of all generations have worshipped and do worship those things that make them wealthy and successful. And so Habakkuk's conclusion is, are the wicked to continue this? Are they continue going on their destruction without mercy? God, are you going to put a stop to this? Are you going to be just? in the face of such wickedness? Well, when life doesn't make sense, what do? We complain. Naturally, we complain. Things don't make sense. I'm going to write a furious letter and send it off to the company that I'm upset with. I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to call. I'm going to let that person have it. I'm going to write out this angry comment and post it on social media because I have a complaint. I am upset. I have to do something about it. Habakkuk here has a complaint. He says so in chapter 2, verse 1. And now that he has spelled out his complaint, he is going to eagerly wait for a response. He compares himself to a watchman standing at the ramparts. The ramparts would be like standing on top of the wall or standing in a watchtower looking for God's response to come back to him. The watchman is the one who receives the breaking news. He's the first one to know that something is happening. So Habakkuk here isn't describing his physical location in any way. No, he's using this illustration as a metaphor for the posture of his heart as he waits for God to respond to his complaint. The modern day equivalent to what Habakkuk is saying here is, okay, I have written my letter, I have mailed off my complaint, and I am going to sit at my mailbox until you respond. It is that sort of insistence and watchfulness as Habakkuk waits to hear back from the Lord. Armitage said that he revealed a mature wisdom in his determination that this response be shaped by what God himself would say. It takes a wise man who takes his questions about God to God for answers. It is a wise man who takes his questions about God to God for answers. And sure enough, as we get to Habakkuk chapter 2, in verse 2, the Lord responds to what Habakkuk has to say. He tells Habakkuk to write this message on tablets and to send the messengers running from town to town to town, relaying the message that he is going to communicate. And here is that message. Habakkuk 2, verse 2. Then the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. But the righteous person will live by his faithfulness. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. As we get to verse 3 in the Lord's answer to Habakkuk, he essentially tells Habakkuk that a final answer to his complaint is coming, but you're going to have to wait a very long time to see it come to fruition. He tells Habakkuk to write this word on tablets because it may take a very long time for God to resolve the Babylonian problem. If he had written on parchments, on paper, that paper may not survive the destruction that is to come. But writing it in stone, on tablets, communicates both the importance of what God is about to say and also the necessity for this message to have some longevity, because it's going to take a long time before this answer is fully given. God essentially here is saying that my final answer is going to come, but it's going to take a while. Don't worry, it's going to come at the exact right time, even if it takes longer than you think it should. God's final answer to Habakkuk's Babylonian problem is going to be consistent with his character. He is going to be faithful to his people, and he is going to stop the wicked in their tracks. And this is borne out in world history as we know it. Though the Babylonians take Judah into exile for a 70-year period, we know that God destroys the Babylonians and eventually brings Israel back home to Jerusalem. And all of this happens probably after the end of Habakkuk's lifetime. God says, I'm going to answer, but you're going to have to wait. I'm going to resolve your complaint, but it's going to take longer than what you would expect from a human perspective. So, as we get to verses 4 and 5, therefore, here is how you are to live while you wait. These are the words to reassure you and guide you through the chaos and destruction and heartache that is coming. First, he gives a message for the wicked. And in the middle of his message about the wicked, he gives us a golden phrase for the righteous. So, here's what God says about the wicked. First, we read that God sees the wicked. It comforts the oppressed to know that God knows every single detail about what the wicked are doing and have done to them. God says that he is puffed up, the enemy is puffed up, that his desires are not right, that he is arrogant, that he is overconfident, that he is bent on his sinful course. God knows the desires of their heart. He knows what they have done. He knows the desires of our hearts. He sees the wicked even while the wicked seem to be getting ahead. He sees the wicked even when the wicked seem to be doing just fine. The second thing God says about the wicked is that they are never at rest. At this point, the Babylonians have everything that they could ever want. They have power, they have wealth, and they have lavish parties. The Babylonians were known to be heavy drinkers, as verse 5 says, that wine betrays him. They're heavy drinkers with lavish parties, and in fact, this is what leads to the downfall of their kingdom, as we read it in Daniel chapter 5. The downfall of their kingdom happened at the conclusion of one of these lavish parties. But despite all of the things that they had, in a worldly perspective, they never truly rest. And that brings us to the last thing. The wicked are never truly satisfied. Like death seizes all people, Babylon would not be satisfied until she captured all of the nations in her path. And when they capture these nations, they gather in the nations. You'll see this at the end of verse 5. When it talks about gathering in the nations, it's speaking to their practice in what we call the exile. They would have a military battle with whatever nation they were warring against. And whatever survivors there were at the end of the clash, they would take those survivors and lead them to resettlement in the kingdom of Babylon. And then a few generations later, their cultural identity of days gone by has been totally washed away and swept up into Babylonian culture. Walvoord said that the people were never truly satisfied, no matter how much they had. Here's his quote. In essence, God told his prophet that the Babylonian successes would only feed the flames of their desires. As passion is inflamed, the emptiness within is enlarged, and the wicked man is driven to push further into sin in a vain attempt to find satisfaction. as passion is inflamed, as they get more and more of what they want, the emptiness within is only enlarged, and we are driven in a vain attempt to fill that ever-widening hole that we sense in our own souls that cannot be satisfied with the things of this world. This is not just a Babylonian experience. This is a common human experience. This is something that we each can identify in our own lives, in those times where we have not been seeking our satisfaction that can only come from God. So we've been seeking the satisfaction in the vain pursuits of this world. So, how are we supposed to live while life doesn't make sense? Well, with regard to the wicked, we can be assured that God sees all. And though it seems like they're getting ahead and having a great life, be assured their soul will not find rest and satisfaction apart from God. And as you listen this morning, I can assure you that your soul will not find rest and satisfaction apart from God. In the middle of verse 4, we have this phrase that stands as gold. The righteous person will live by his faithfulness. If you have the English Standard Version, you would read that the righteous live by faith. This short and sweet message is the message of hope. This short and sweet message guides the righteous in how to live when life does not make sense. You see, in contrast to those who are self-reliant and worship their own strength, the righteous are reliant on the God in whom they put their faith. The righteous person stands and does what is right in God's eyes, as opposed to the wicked who do what is right in their own eyes. The righteous live by faith, by trusting in God even when life doesn't make any sense, by being faithful to God, trusting that God is faithful to us, even when reality might not seem like it. Faith in God is the key to living consistently even when chaos swirls around us. Faith helps us to persevere in doing what is right, even when injustice prevails. Faith keeps us clinging to God, even when doubts begin to creep into our minds. Faith trusts that God is all-wise and that He is sovereignly moving history towards His purposes, even when we don't understand how all of that is going to work. Do you have faith in God, even when you don't understand what He is doing? Do you have faith in God, even when life doesn't make sense? We hear so much in our world right now about people with a hidden agenda in politics, in healthcare, in the pharmaceutical world. If you have a video that claims to unveil the hidden agenda of anyone in any of these spheres of influence, your video is going to go viral. People right now are wary of people driving their hidden agendas. They're wary of any authority using the crisis to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish before the crisis began. Now let me ask you this. What if God uses crisis to accomplish what He wanted to accomplish before the crisis? What if God is using the coronavirus to do what God wanted to accomplish before the coronavirus? Now let me take it out of the question realm and put this as a bold declaration that God is using what we are going through right now to accomplish His purposes. and the righteous stand in faith even when God's agenda is hidden from their eyes. Let me say that again. The righteous stand in faith even when God's agenda is hidden from their eyes. Faith that God is using the events of history to accomplish his purposes, even when we don't know what those purposes are, even when he's using evil people by evil means to get ahead in life and crush us and push us down and make our lives miserable. Ken Barker concluded that his working in history may appear as mysterious and inconsistent to us as it did to Habakkuk. The answer is not in rejecting God or in disconnecting him from our history. The answer is in waiting for his timing to bring about his purposes. Such waiting calls for faithfulness in having faith. And so, how do we live when life doesn't make sense? We live by faith, abiding in his righteousness and trusting that he is going to accomplish his purposes in his time. Oh God, we come to you today in faith, trusting in what you are doing even when it doesn't make sense to us. And Lord, without a doubt right now, there are a lot of people listening to this message who are confused, who are baffled. There are some that are listening to this message right now who are questioning what you are doing. They're questioning who you are. There are some listening to this message right now who are confused and questioning what's happening in our world. And they are shaken to the very core of their being because everything that they once put confidence in has now been swept away from underneath their feet. And Lord, we come back to these words of hope, that the righteous live by faith. Lord, we find our life when we put our faith in you. We find stability, we find our confidence when we come back to the truths of who you are, when we put our trust in what you are doing, even when we don't understand what you are doing. And so I pray this morning, alongside of the questioning and confused brother and sister, I pray that they would return to walking in your right ways and that they would put their faith in you. Lord, increase our faith. Set our eyes to be steadfast upon you. And we know that as we do, you will guide us, not just through this pandemic, but you will guide us through whatever situation and circumstances we are confronted with as we go forward in life. Thank you for your presence here with us today. And in Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. Wonderful to be together virtually this morning, and I hope that you all have a wonderful Mother's Day. If you're not able to celebrate with your mother, I hope that you're at least able to talk and use the technology of FaceTime to speak with her and to celebrate together today. Please be looking forward to some of the pieces of communication that are coming out from the church in the weeks ahead. You should have received in your email inboxes the elders' direction for how we're planning to regather as a church whenever that time comes. And then also, please join us this Saturday for our final Design to Be Mine session. That's going to be a Zoom link that is again sent out to our weekly email update list. Have a wonderful Mother's Day and a wonderful week ahead.